So being that it's March 5th, this must be the creative economy. And I welcome all of you who are here present now and others who will be joining us on our YouTube link, which will be put up tomorrow morning. So I'm going to let Haley Simons do the introduction. What will follow today is Margaret Collins will present from the Center for the Creative Economy, and then later on we'll have a discussion when Mark Anielski arrives. So without any further ado, Haley, it's up to you.
Thanks, Perry. Really excited to be talking about the creative economy today, and really excited for Margaret to share what's going on in the Piedmont Triad and for Mark to share his exciting work about the economics of happiness. I do want to give a little bit of a background about the creative economy, and of course it's going to be based on creative industries, and the support of the creative industries is a mission which offers more than just an economic drive. It offers profoundly positive global impact. And they're not just an engine for economic growth because of the jobs that entrepreneurs can generate, but there's a report from the United Nations Development Program that goes even further, and they categorize it. They say cultural and creative industries, which include arts and crafts, advertising, design, entertainment, architecture, books, media, and software, have become a vital force in accelerating human development. They empower people to take ownership of their own development and stimulate the innovation that can drive inclusive, sustainable growth. And if well nurtured, the creative economy can be a source of structural economic transformation, socioeconomic progress, job creation, and innovation, while contributing to social inclusion and sustainable human development. And if that isn't something to work for, I don't know what is. And of course, we know the creative industries have become an increasingly important contributor for GDP growth, the human growth. It's absolutely astounding, yet there's still a lot of confusion about exactly what they are and what they can do, and the programs that are going on globally right now. So I'm very excited to introduce Margaret Collins. Margaret and I met with our work on the National Creativity Network. If you were here last week, you met George Sugros, and George is the board chair. The honorary chair of that organization is the late Sir Ken Robinson. Actually, it was Sir Ken's birthday yesterday, and they have some exciting honorary and memorial projects involved with that as well. Margaret has, I'm going to let Margaret tell everybody what she does, because she'll do a far better job than I will. Margaret, you're on. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Haley. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I will share what I do, but I do have a presentation that I'd like to share with you, because I think saying it in pictures and words and data will help. Is it possible to share my screen? Okay, there we go. So, hi. As Haley said, I'm Margaret Collins. I am the founding executive director of the Center for Creative Economy. We are about to celebrate our 10th anniversary. We were founded in 2011, and so 2021 is our 10th year. And we have been working actively to help creative entrepreneurs launch, grow, and accelerate. That is what we do. And I am just going to keep going here. So I work with creative founders very closely. And what happens when they are trying to grow projects, grow businesses, and scale is access to capital is a huge challenge. And women and minorities are at risk for being overlooked. And what I'm here to tell you is that it is really important to address this issue, because studies show that when you have a large, diverse minority population and women that are running businesses, that you actually increase your creative economy, you increase your economic impact multiple times. During our last recession, minority and women actually created 1.8 million jobs, which was far more than any of the other sectors. So Center for Creative Economy works with these really critical founders. We are focused on creative entrepreneurs. Our city is the city of arts and innovation. But because we work in the creative economy, many women and minorities are attracted to the work that we do. And so it's organically turned out that way. Our that's our market, the people that come and do and work in our programs. But it's now time for us to be more intentional about that. And that's what we're planning to do as we grow the next 10 years. But I just wanted to start with that because the problem to solve in the creative industries is really how we can get more capital and more access to the type of mentorship and programs that can enable the artists and creatives to do what they need to do. So the way we do that is through inception stage business training. We have programs that take a robust curriculum in building business skills. We marry that with wonderful mentors, customized mentorship, and we launch the capacity for, we expand the capacity for creatives and help make them viable entrepreneurs. So we can help someone with just an idea. Our Kinetic Bootcamp is for idea stage entrepreneurs. Our Momentum program is a monthly meetup, networking, and idea generation opportunity. And then we have our Velocity, which is a 9-week business accelerator, which takes the serious entrepreneur and gets them ready, business model fleshed out, and really helps them focus and launch and grow. So the impact that we've had over the last 5 years is that we have helped launch 50 companies. 90% of those companies are still in business. This is way beyond the normal entrepreneurial stats. Normally 1 in 10 companies survive through the first 2 to 3 years of existence. But what we found is that creative artists and creatives are really smart. It is hard to get a degree in design or art or music or all of those things create such amazing critical thinking skills that once they have decided that they're going to start a business with this, then they just have to learn the business side or else find a co-founder that knows the business side. But once they expose their mind to it and try to learn about that, they can do it. But they need help because they haven't been exposed to it. Most schools don't teach entrepreneurship or business skills for creatives. So these are our numbers so far over the past 5 years. The companies that we've worked with have earned 8.1 million in revenue and have attracted 7.4 million in investment. And as I said, we have almost 70% are women and close to 40% are minority founders, and they have collectively created 177 jobs. Now, this is our stats from 2020. We are calculating our 2021 stats, and we know already that several of our companies have had big investments. So those numbers are going to go up. Both the revenue and the investment numbers are going to go up. So we have a wonderful, robust ecosystem here in North Carolina. And this is my slide to show how we collaborate across lots of different sectors. I represent the creative economy. So our artists and creatives come through my programs. We have a wonderful private foundation called NC Idea that funds entrepreneurship across North Carolina. They fund not only the resource providers like CCE, but they fund directly to the entrepreneurs. And it's not easy to get a grant from them, but they are we in North Carolina are very focused on growing our entrepreneurial footprint, not just in creative, all across all sectors. Entrepreneurship, new business starts have declined in the United States. I don't have the figures right in front of me, but we are declining in new business startups and growth. And other countries like Africa and across Europe and the Middle East are growing exponentially with their entrepreneurship. So we So we in North Carolina really want to get more startups started. And so we have banded together as an ecosystem in our community. All of these groups work with with entrepreneurs in different types of entrepreneurs and in different stages of their work. And there's many more than this, but these are kind of the main ones that we collaborate with really closely. Our programs are not just for North Carolinians. We have our program attracts startups globally. Here you see the different cities and countries that have worked with us. We have had, in our most recent Velocity cohort, we had a company from Seattle, Kansas City, Cleveland, Philadelphia, and then teams from Spain and France. We've also had teams from Mexico, and the Guadeloupe, the islands. So we are open to working with entrepreneurs in any location. We deliver our programs in a hybrid model. It's taught in person for anyone who wants to be in person, and then online for those that can't be with us. And we've done this for 5 years. So the online part of our curriculum has always been there. Of course, it's gotten accelerated during the Zoom time, during the COVID time. And we actually have mentors that are now remote, are online, so they can be anywhere. So that really works out well. So basically what we look at is that we're seeding the pipeline for the entrepreneurial activities in Winston-Salem, across North Carolina, and then back in the communities where they live. There's an incubator that is a really great next step after you go through our Velocity accelerator. It's called Winston Starts. And we now have helped 11 companies get into that accelerator. It's an incubator. It's a residential incubator. It's space, mentorship, access to capital, all that stuff. So what we look at is we're inception stage. We work with the idea stage companies up to the early growth. And then we get them really trained and get their business models solid, help them attract early stage customers, and then move them on to other programs and ways where they can grow further. So I heard you all talking a little bit about creative industries. Everyone always wants to know, well, what is a creative economy? What is creative industry? So this is a pretty robust list of industries that we, of course, would pull from for any kind of a person that's coming into our program, but it goes beyond that. We always say this list appears in our applications, and we say, so if you're not on this list, send us an email or a text, and we'll talk about it. I was part of the conversation for about an hour last week, and I know that you all kept expanding the definition of the creatives and creative economy. And yes, it's very broad, but for our purposes to offer training, we really do have to have some kind of focus around what we do. And we really try to have where art, design, and technology meet, and people that really are interested in using their artisanal, cultural, artist type of experience and training and molding it into a business. That's kind of our take on it. And different organizations have different ways of looking at it. So just a brief recap on our programs. We have the boot camp, which is, we're actually in a 4-week boot camp right now. We have teams from North Carolina and one in Indiana that has joined us for this program. And the big focus for Kinetic is customer discovery. They have to go out and talk to 5 customers a week, whether it's Zoom or in person. And that will then inform their solution that they're trying to present to the public, their idea that they're trying to get hammered out. And we work very closely on the business model, idea validation, but it's really, really about customers. And they learn so much by talking to people. And we train them how to talk to customers, because you don't just go tell them you've got a wonderful art supply store that you're doing. You have to ask them in a way about, like, when was the last time you had to solve the problem of, and you put it into a problem context. So then people can answer you openly and honestly without your biasing them. So we're teaching them how to try to ask good questions of their customers. And then our Velocity Accelerator is the big program that we do every year. It is a 9-week program. We run it between August and September. The stats I mentioned earlier, 10 companies actually work with us, and they are chosen nationally and globally from between July and October. We raise funding. So we are a nonprofit, and we raise funding to put all these programs on. There is a cost. The startups do pay a small participation fee, but they do pay to attend, participate. And then in Velocity, we actually have a cash award of $50,000 that's split between 3 of the companies. So there is an incentive for them to apply and to come through the program. And we have 35 plus mentors. And then we have a demo night that every year we present to the public. So that's the next one we're planning on. So this was a slide about just what we're doing. So, we deploy 50,000 a year. They're actually deployed as 0 interest loans. We get the loans back. We've now invested 180,000 into companies. And our impact each year increases 50 to 100% per year because those startups are growing their revenue and their investment every year. So we feel that what we're doing, our programs and the way we're kind of catalyzing entrepreneurs is really a lever for entrepreneurial success in our state. And at this point, our original investment was $50,000. And we've now loaned over 180,000. So that's a 3.5 times our original investment. And that money has now leveraged 8.1 million in revenue and 7.4 million in investment. And the money is being repaid. We're on a good track record for getting it back. So our goal this year with the 10th anniversary is to keep raising. We have to raise a lot of money this year because we want to really work to make our programs sustainable for the next 10 years. And have our fund be evergreen and always have the launch funds there. So a few of our success stories, of course, it's not about me, it's about the startups. And these are some great companies that have really done well. Kevin Clark, upper right, from Boston. He came through our program. He did so well. I think he came in second. He won the $15,000 seed funding. He got so much support. His company, he uses music to actually help autistic kids and seniors through a motion capture software that actually helps you move. So he's a musician, he's a composer, and he's come up with a platform of software that actually uses music to attract the attention of the patient. They then respond to that music and to prompts and do movements that then the healthcare provider can track and diagnose. It's a diagnostic tool. He has now moved to Winston-Salem. He was very pleased with all the mentorship he got. And if you work in a small community, you can sometimes make a greater impact if you're in a smaller town than in a bigger town. But he has contacts all over the country now. Jenny Earle's a local Winston-Salem-based artist. She designs bandanas that are artisanal. She creates all the designs. She hand prints, hands dyes, hand sews, does it all. And she has about 15 people that she hires to help her with all of her work. She's been written up in Garden and Gun, Martha Stewart Living, Oprah Winfrey. She is like the bandana, if you look up bandanas, artisanal bandanas, you'll see. She came out with a Ruth Bader Ginsburg bandana. She just launched a subscription bandana service. So you can get one, you can join her subscription and get one every, I don't know if it's every month, but she's learning a lot about the business side of things, but she's a lovely, very, very creative person. And these were the last two. So Preet Singh was our winner from 2019. He is from New Delhi, India. He has now moved to North Carolina. His business is called Live Furnish. It takes it's photography automation in the furnishings business. So he basically can take your CAD drawings, any kind of CAD drawings for the furniture, put it through his platform, and he turns it into beautiful 2 and 2D renderings that you can then use to sell your furniture. So his customers are the furniture business. And we are one of the world headquarters for furniture in North Carolina. So he sought us out. He heard about us and wanted to come and be part of and launch his company in North Carolina. Now he also has a company still in India, but he's he's doing really, really well here. He just earned a $1.5 million investment round that is not included in the numbers that I quoted because we haven't done the 21 numbers yet. But his company is doing really well, and investors are taking note of it. And then this last one is Token. It's a game. It's playing board games. It's an app that helps people that like to play board games connect around a table. So if you want to play Catan and you want to play it next Friday, but you don't have but 2 people and you want to find 6 more or whatever it is, and you can put the game on the app and say, please join me for Catan, and I'll be at the the deli on Jonestown Road, and then you connect. So he launched last February, and he had a big success, got lots of users, but then COVID hit. So right now is a slow time because you can't gather people to play board games, but they're still at it, and they're hoping to reboot, relaunch when we are all vaccinated and we can join together to play games. So that's just a snapshot of what we do, and an overview of some of the successful people that have gone through our program. I hope that's helpful. I don't know what I didn't know exactly what you wanted me to do, but I know how to talk about what we do, so that's what I chose to share with you today.
Would you be at all interested in us broadcasting a little bit of a notice out to our network that you have such an incubator available or accelerator? See whether or not see whether Edmonton shows up on your list next time you do this.
Oh, we would love to. In fact, our applications will open in April. We're getting everything ready for the Velocity Accelerator. We run the application April and May, and then they're always due like around the 1st of June. Then we pick the people. But absolutely, I would love to share with you. I can share with you the marketing, when we get the application out. But for sure, just if you want to share this information that it's available.
What catches my attention, and thank you, Haley, is that you're not completely specialized, but you're one of the only incubators that I know of that has sort of brought arts and innovation to the surface. And if that's a specialty, and that's how you would wish to be branded, then it would seem to me a no-brainer that given what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, that we wrap this up by pointing out what you are doing to our network. Haley, what do you think?
I think that would be terrific and a natural extension too. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Would this be available?
What do you think, Tom?
Would this be available to Canadians or?
Well, it was available to people in France, so it ought to be, unless you're in Quebec.
Okay.
Oh yeah, anywhere. It's available to anywhere globally. So we've had participants from Mexico, France, Spain, and the islands, Guadeloupe. We've had other countries. Always we get tons of Africans apply, and the Middle East. But
excellent. We have similar programs that cover some of the things that you're doing, but certainly not focused on the arts or anything like that. But it is so tough, as you know, the work that's required to pull off a successful company is very, very challenging. And especially now in this COVID season we're in, COVID-19 season we're in, it's just really really tough at the moment. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, and you start off as the cliche, I'm a skilled craftsman, but I don't know anything about business. And I'll tell you, that's so true, through the whole system, that so many young and older entrepreneurs need direction as far as business goes.
Margaret,
Right. And what we find,
can you take the for information down, or Claire, can you close it off so we can get back?
oh, sorry, yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
One of the things we find, it's really hard to find the startups because they don't know that we exist. And we have a new marketing director that just started last month, and she goes, we don't want CCE to be a well-kept secret anymore. I'm like, no, we don't. We're ready to unmask ourselves. We'd like to be known better and for people to know it exists. It's a wonderful program so anybody that you know of, and that's usually how we do our marketing. We reach out to people that we know and say, this program exists, share it with people that you think might be interested.
Well, isn't the Center for the Creative Economy something that's already linked into every state of the US? I mean, I would think it would be a no-brainer for you to simply turn that hourglass upside down and have it all flow to you.
Well, I'd like to get your advice on how to do that. I'm not sure exactly how. I'm working on it. I've got some people helping me. In fact, one of my partners in the co-work space that we work this week said, hey, your programs are doing so well. I'm going to connect you. I think you should now start marketing them to arts councils, and you can license them, and you can work in arts councils all over the, well, he was talking about the state, but of course there's other places. And I have another partner who is helping us with Kinetic. We're going to be looking at how we can scale it and make it so that it could be put in, so that another partner could actually, we could license it or work with someone that could bring it directly into their community without us even having to be there.
So should I call it an incubator or an accelerator, or do you have a term that is preferable?
It's an accelerator, and there is a difference. Yeah. Yes. We are an accelerator. Velocity is an accelerator. Accelerators are defined by kind of compact, shorter periods of time, periods of educational content, mentorship, and then funding. If you are an accelerator, it's the expectation is there is some kind of funding associated with it. Incubators are more long-term. It's usually more residential, office space, mentoring, helping. Obviously, education can continue, but it's usually not a defined period of time. They're more open-ended.
Is it mandatory that it be for profit, or is it not for profit? Can you give us a sense of the business model?
For CCE? Well, CCE is we personally are a nonprofit, but the companies that we accept can be for-profit or nonprofit. Yes. Okay. We prefer them to be for-profit because that's what we teach is the for-profit business development. We will take one nonprofit per cohort in our and we have a nonprofit in our Kinetic cohort right now.
No, I was referring not so much to your customers, but to the accelerator itself.
Yes, we are a nonprofit.
Oh, well, that's awfully gracious of you. Why aren't you for profit? Why aren't you taking a percentage of as a landlord?
We do not take a percentage of business. We are a nonprofit. So we raise the funding. So when you are an accelerator, usually you invest the money and then you get a percentage of the equity of the company, say 5%. And then you have that money tied up until that startup has an exit, grows and has an exit, because we're all about training and having the money come back and get forward. And we want the money back. We help them get to the point where they're revenue positive and investor positive so that they can then pay it back. And we have the money for the next one. I mean, we're just not, there's not enough funding in the program for us to be able to leave money on the table invested in companies, or we wouldn't then have money for the next go round.
Okay, well, I just wanted to stir the pot a little bit. Tom, it certainly sounds like something right up your alley.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at a lot, just exchanging notes with Perry here, because we both have been entrepreneurs for, in fact, Perry and I used to be business partners in a company that we thought was going to knock everybody's socks off. And we did interactives for museums and for schools and all sorts of stuff, you know. So yeah, I'm always, I've had a hard time the last 2 years, and I'm now looking at trying to resurface with some concept that will really set apart and make money. I want to make money at doing my artwork.
Yeah,
That's Perry Schulock, right?
Yeah, that's Terry Shulak. Yeah.
Okay. We could use middle names to differentiate or whatever.
Yeah, that would be me.
we want our folks to make money. That's what we teach them. We teach them how to do that and how to, well, you got to have customers and you got to talk to customers so that customers understand, so that you understand what a customer might want.
Yeah.
Now, creating jobs and wealth creation is not alien at all to anyone at this table. So my hat's off to you and what you've been able to do within the innovation and arts community. Good for you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Gary.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a hard path, man.
It's been 10 years of hard work.
Look, nobody said life was a bowl of cherries. It's nothing wrong with hard work if you're doing what you enjoy.
That's true. That's very true.
I mean, I think
Some days when people don't pay, and then you are having to pay your staff first, and then you're having to get financing to make it through the next 6 months. And then you realize that, oh, there's somebody else out there who's got a better product than you have, that you sometimes think, oh my Christ, what the hell am I doing? My wife's favorite wine is, when you're going to get a regular job? That's her.
you know, you just tell her you retired early and you continue to work hard, but just don't get a salary. So that's...
It's my name.
Haley, do you want to add anything as we've brought this portion to the table?
Sure, and it's interesting that you're talking about money because I remember last week, Perry, you alluded to the fact that artists who wanted support had that similar handshake to the university with their hand out.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to highlight that it is so not the case, and that this kind of venture deserves at least as much government support and community support as any other industry. And it shouldn't be excluded from that kind of support just because it involves artists and just because it involves a cultural component to it. And I think we've seen that. I think there's been an exceptional prejudice against culture and artistic and the creative industries. We have not been treated the same as any of the other industries. And I tossed out a couple stats last week. In BC, the creative industries are greater contributors than fishing and mining combined. So government certainly supports those. Nobody runs screaming and crying because, oh no, the lumber industry has their hand out again. Yet when artists do it, we see the starving artist paradigm and scenario. And I think it's grossly unfair. And I would love to hear, Margaret, what kind of improvements in the community you've seen since you've started this.
Well, I shared with you that slide about all the ecosystem partners, because I think that's our biggest success so far, is that we all now are working together. And in many communities, the people that help entrepreneurs don't work together. They're very competitive. And we meet every other month. The heads of all the organizations meet bi-monthly, every other month. And then the heads of our staff, our programming people on our staffs, they meet monthly, so that we all know what everybody's presenting, and then we help promote it. You know, we will, in our e-blasts and our social media, we help promote the other things. So that's helped. And because I am a nonprofit, I have to fundraise, and I get, every time I go to any major business leader or government, they say, well, are you working with so-and-so? Are you working with that? And so that's why I have that slide, is because yes, we work with all of them, and they all are nonprofits, and they're all trying to raise money. Our next big hurdle is to try to get some major funding for our ecosystem as a whole, so that we, aren't seen as, competitors to each other. Fortunately, the city of Winston-Salem does fund CCE. The county of Forsyth County does fund CCE, and we have some very generous corporate donors and individual donors, and some foundations that have funded us, that are funded.
There are places in the US that have a reputation for having elevated the relevance of arts as an economic force in their community, also to make their communities more attractive to contemporary labor. And I think of Austin, Texas, and I'm sure there are other places, but the mayor in Edmonton has from time to time stood out or stood up or whatever and said that he wishes to see Edmonton take a stronger position in recognizing the relevance of the arts in a healthy, sustainable community. Are there other communities that we might point to in Canada and or within the United States that might be partners for this community?
Silicon Valley is certainly the big one in the States, and in Austin is sort of taking over. And they have that South by Southwest conference every year. And it's amazing, you know, I've always wanted to go to it. There's music and arts and film and everything else. And they've done a really smart thing there with that Austin, the South by Southwest event.
Yeah, and I think Nashville, of course, with music, Nashville is a real recording hub, and Charlotte has done a lot with their art scene. They have a whole Charlotte Creates, I think is what it's called. I mean, Haley knows this, but we formed an organization called the Creative Economy Coalition, which was underneath the Creative Network, the National Creative Network. And so that was all of the people that we could find that were doing creative economy work in various cities. And we had Boston and DC and North Carolina, and yeah, we had I don't know, it's like 60. We have LA. I mean, there's lots, but everybody does creative economy a little differently. I mean, we focus on the entrepreneur. Some people focus on the data and just making big data dumps and, analyzing data.
Intelligence and all that.
I mean, what I'm particularly interested is the bridging, where there were once silos like engineering and the arts, and where bridges are being built between segments of the economy, representing a transition from a focus totally on supply to a better appreciation of the relevance of the consumer, of the customer, of the client. Because what seems to be happening with technology today is it's moving from a focus solely on supplier to a focus increasingly on the relevance of the consumer as market forces play a stronger role, particularly here in Canada, in health and education and the infrastructure built by government, but beginning to find out that we can't continue to sustain them based on government alone, which is resulting in some transitions. And what we're seeing in particular is the suffering or the claiming of suffering in some classically public sectors like health and education in Canada. And until they wake up to the fact that government is not likely to be their patron in the future, and I have to be a little careful here because it seems to be we're arguing that the government ought to pay more attention to the arts, and I wouldn't dismiss that, but I'd say I think the arts need to pay a lot more attention to the community that they're serving so well in Austin and Nashville and Los Angeles, et cetera. You might want to jump in and challenge me on some of these perspectives.
The UPC government in Alberta here has just recently actually committed to a lot of different loans for the movie business mostly and the video business, which is good. So I belong to Ampia.
It's good, Tom, if it's good, if it helps in the startup, but if it becomes a dependency and it's a subsidy, we end up subsidizing and sustaining an industry because it's so totally on government. I can't buy into that. I can buy into subsidies to trigger something, but not to sustain it.
On any film production, the government will always be a small player because the thing is, it's so expensive to make a film, and there's so much involved with all of that. In Calgary has done a much better job of actually selling itself as a location with a new studio, all sorts of stuff going on down there. So and they got the mountains nearby. Okay, so you can do all sorts of wonderful films up in the mountains there. So yeah, Vancouver's done well with their business there, mostly producing American product, but they've done so well, and all of that is from outside money. Not really. The government only supports a very small percentage of all of that industry in Vancouver.
That's good to hear. I mean, I look at KSPS, which for most of us in Western Canada are familiar with as a public station. And when you see the financing, it doesn't mention government at all. It mentions wealthy families. It mentions patrons. It's obviously done a job in attracting people in the community who have done well, who are recognizing the value of that whole list that Margaret shared with us. And are willing to say that they've generated wealth in their lifetime and wish now to spread that wealth in order to elevate the relevance of the arts and communications in their communities. I think that's laudatory, and I wish we did more of that.
They want to improve society generally, and improve the intelligence of the society. And I think that they are wonderful service.
I just want to interject that when you're trying to get funding for any kind of program like this, or you want to advocate for it, if you could lead with jobs, data, revenue, investment, and say, and you lead with that, and you say, and these people are creative. He's a musician from the Berklee School of Music, but he created this incredible app that software that helps autistic kids get diagnosed. So you lead with the data that the economists and the business people and the government can understand. Because you're right, if you lead with, oh, we're these great artists and yes, they can do other things, that's just not going to work. So that's how we get successful.
It's ironic in our system here is that the government certainly understands what you're talking about. That's what we get through to them with, but they don't understand anything about artists or anything like that. So you have to talk money and stats, and jobs is big money. This government's doing nothing about jobs, but at least in the artistic sector, they're appearing like they're doing something, so anyway.
Well, the word of the day or the word of the month or the word of the last few years has been innovation.
Yeah.
And it's innovation by definition implies moving well beyond an idea into the commercialization, and that is tying ideas to money. I think that's what Margaret's in essence saying, is there's no reason to dismiss the arts as not creating jobs, because it does create jobs. And it certainly makes contributions to communities which are not so readily assessed in terms of the almighty dollar, but they do have dollar relevance.
Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't be afraid of it.
And Perry, I think that's kind of where I'd challenge you on your previous point is just in your last statement saying that the arts eventually does lead to jobs, right? Creativity does lead to jobs, does lead to economy. And I think that's one of the functions of government. That's one of the two functions of society. One is for survival, and the other one is, I think, to support creativity and bring that to market, right? Like that's the job of the government.
For years, we've had the example here of BioWare, right? And the two doctors that started BioWare, and they for the first several years, if they weren't doctors, they wouldn't.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there for a minute, Tom, because you have opened up a whole area that is of great interest to all of us.
Yeah.
BioWare is one example. Who bought BioWare? A U.S. company. Who just bought Verify? A U.S. company. Who just bought? I can cite a half a dozen, and I'm going to bring some of them to the table in May, that have done very, very well as Canadian companies. And who bought them? The United States. That's point number one. But point number two, and this is where it really gets interesting. Point number two is that money came to Canada. I can cite $5 billion, and the National Post cited a lot more than that that's come into Canada this year. There's been a reversal. More money came into Canada through the sale of companies from Canada into the US. What are we doing with the money that we have just, what did BioWare do with the money? What is Verify going to do with the money? Are they going to, in a nouveau riche society, which is not what Austin, Texas was, because I assessed this through Laura Kilcrease, those that succeeded in the selling off of companies turned that money into creating more innovation in their communities. We're in a nouveau riche economy. You end up buying houses in Arizona and buying cars and buying planes and buying homes and not turning it back. And that's something we need to learn in Canada, is when you've succeeded, we're awfully selfish in how we spend that money as opposed to turning it into something that is stimulating and growth oriented to community. US is much more volunteer minded. And the wealthy have in fact given back. And we're not so good at that. I think that's something we need to learn.
But we have the big success story in Toronto, Shopify, right? In Ottawa originally.
Sure.
And Shopify is doing fantastic, right? And
Absolutely.
it's keeping money coming into Canada. Sure,
but my question, my point is, those owners of Shopify, those owners of the companies that have been sold, are those owners of BioWare turning that money back into the Edmonton community or the Vancouver community and helping those communities grow more innovation and more companies? Or are they taking the money and spending it on themselves?
Well, BioWare was bought out by Electronic Arts, and so that changes the whole situation. It's one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, but BioWare still has a big presence here. They have.
You're missing my point.
Yeah.
Do you know who the owners of BioWare were?
Yeah, I do. I know them both. Yeah.
And what are they doing with the money that they earned?
Driving a very fancy BMW.
Okay, my point. And my discussions with Verify that just sold for several $1 million, and with Laurie Schultz, who sold out of Vancouver for $1 billion, is the question: are they building incubators? Are they spending money on recreating what they learned and what they did, so their communities and many other innovators like them can prosper? We need to learn that lesson. I think accelerators could do a marvelous job if they would be investing their money in accelerators.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Well, and entrepreneurship and building, you
Absolutely.
you have to keep building new companies. The US what we're falling behind. I'll tell you who's doing is Africa and the Middle East. They're bumping them out. There's a lot more entrepreneurship and new business growth in the Middle East and Africa than there is in the United States right now.
No, they don't have some of the cultural barriers that we've built into what constitutes real innovation.
Yeah,
we've got caught up in a lot of cultural things that if you're not working with the government, if you're not in the government, if you're not working with the university or any of our public institutions, that somehow you're on the sidelines and aren't relevant. Breaking through this cultural impasse of maintaining the status quo, as opposed to taking some chances and getting into the future, therein lies one of the cultural transitions we need to go through. Sometimes success breeds pride, which is the beginning of a collapse.
Yeah. Where are the Carnegies, who built the libraries in the States? Where are these people?
I like that last point, Perry.
Go ahead, Jesse, speak up.
I'm just saying, I like that last point.
Reinforce it. What was that last point? Sometimes I forget what I said.
About success breeding pride.
Yeah.
And Tam always advocates, I know you guys don't know my business partner, Tam, but Tam, he advocates for a major disruption in the forestry industry, for example. He says the only way they're going to change is if they have a major disruption, if some big disaster is going to force them to change, because they kind of hit they got to this point of success and there was no more real incentive for them to improve or to explore these other areas. And so whether it's pride or whatever, I think that, anyway, I just really like that point.
Well, when I joined consulting, and I didn't have a freaking clue what my business was going to be, but when I started, my boss called me into his office one day because I was pontificating of these great ideas and how this and that should be happening. And most of my discussion was highly academic and somewhat intellectual. He said to me, let's get it straight. The only reason innovation actually moves forward is when the most sensitive part of the anatomy gets pinched. And that was the pocketbook. And he said, until there is pain felt, most great ideas simply rest as great ideas and sit in the bar or wherever. What accelerators are trying to do is to put those ideas onto a channel that takes them actually into the market instead of and takes them out of academia, takes them out of the ivory tower, takes them out of the brain and puts them in the market. And the one thing she said, Margaret said in one of her first comments, was they spend time introducing the idea and the entrepreneur to the customer. The customer. Bud knows that very well. Perry, you had a comment. Go ahead, Shulek.
Yeah, I am familiar a bit with the two owners with BioWare and Greg Zeschuk and the other fellow, and one of them did start up a investment venture firm.
Yep.
And I believe, and I think Greg as well has been involved in a
Ray
less.
Ray Muschuk. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and Greg was doing some sort of craft beer
Yeah, he's got a
association
TV
of some
network.
sort.
Oh, good news. I mean, I'm not dismissing that some aren't doing something, but this is very highly unusual.
But I think a lot of it lies with the kind of the efforts that a lot of the local facilities are putting in, and as well as other companies that are heavily involved in research and development, such as some of the companies that are involved in machine learning. They don't necessarily, they put a lot of money and research into what they're doing technically, but they don't put much into media content or into the into any art. So there's a lot of activity there, but it doesn't spread out to further expand and diversify the economy.
Well, let's take one by example. Has anybody heard of nanotech?
Yes.
Does anybody
Yeah.
know how much money the federal government put into the Edmonton community through the University of Alberta to develop nanotech as a commercial entity? Well over $1 billion. Do you know what exists today? Nothing. And you know why? They spent zero effort in talking to customers and looking at applications. All of the effort and the time went into the intellect of nanotech as an academic entity, and nothing went into commercialization.
This is Raj Gupta's company, is it?
Yeah, no, Raj is one of the spinoffs. The only way they got any commercial activity out of that is when it closed down and the staff went to market.
But Raj
That's what I'm
is still
saying, that
yeah.
what McNamara did in the United States and advised Kennedy on how to build regional economies was to put defense contracts into regions and then cut them off and throw the engineers to the street, pinching their pocketbooks and forcing them to become entrepreneurs and innovative. It worked over and over and over again. If we could only close down a university.
Yeah.
Well, don't your cities have entrepreneurial hubs?
Oh,
and
yes, they're
work-
real estate deals, Margaret. I could walk into the incubator in Edmonton with my eyes closed and point to which offices and what tenants are sitting in those offices. They don't graduate. Tom, you were in one.
Yeah.
And how many years do those rooms occupy and contain the same companies year after year after year?
Just talked to one yesterday, you know, Ahmad, right?
Yeah, living on low cost rents.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. And they should
Yeah.
be kicked out after a certain number of years based on
Well,
certain
they
criteria.
tried that a few years back and they said 5 years max, right? And that seemed reasonable, but you know,
Does seem reasonable.
now the place is empty, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, and it was at one point really a lively place, and it was so fun to be there because we had architects, we had, you know, people doing 3D plus, you know, the 3D stuff and all that sort of thing, you know, so it had a great atmosphere, but now it's just a desert, you know, it's really sad.
Yeah, I spent 6 years in Film Alberta Studios, which is a film production studio. And at first, when I moved in there, they filled out the entire floor. It was book solid, and then over time, people started leaving. They migrated out, or their companies closed down. And towards the end, all that was left was me and my one little project I had going, and the whole floor was completely cleaned out.
So as someone maybe just walking into the room and hearing the discussion of the last couple of minutes, they would say that your accelerators have failed.
Yes.
Because nobody graduated to start a company. And yet
No.
Margaret has pointed out that whatever she's doing seems to be working with a segment of the community that says, look, if there's any area that struggles more than the arts, I don't know what it is, and yet she's succeeding. What is she doing differently than what our incubators were doing?
I think part of the problem, can I speak to this? Part of the problem is that they're not providing enough funding. Like, for example, the film and
back to money
Alberta Film Fund
Back to
did
money.
increase fund. Yeah, they did increase funding to 50 million, but that's for productions coming in from abroad. For productions that are created locally, they only have $1 million available. These are for productions that are Alberta created from Alberta created producers. So there's definitely a divide between where they see the value in and how they fund productions, because they're more interested in expanding revenue that's coming in from out of the province and actually supporting the people that are here. And so what happens is that there is a little bit of divide between Calgary and Edmonton, because a lot of the media content producers in Edmonton are independents. But all the productions that are now coming into the province are all going to Calgary. So now we have a heavy growth in film and television happening in Calgary, whereas in Edmonton, it's stagnant.
You know, the discussion that I'm hearing is about giving more money to the supplier. When Margaret spoke, she spoke about the customer. How much time do those sitting in our incubators spend out of the incubator in the market, better understanding the consumer, the client, the supply chain? Because when I would walk into incubators, I found them full of staff. The most successful incubator would seem to me would be one that was virtually empty, because the staff are all spending time in the market wanting to better understand and find customers.
Yeah, you know, I told
Go ahead,
you
Margaret, you want to speak up there? Because you're either laughing, going to sleep, or you're...
No, I was just nodding. I mean, yeah, you all should read the book, The Lean Startup, if you haven't.
We're living through it.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's all the title of most of the chapters are, you've got to get out of the building. You know,
Absolutely.
You have to get out of the building. You have to go talk to customers. It's called Lean Startup, iterative. You know, you quickly find an MVP, minimum viable product or service that you can offer. You go out and test it. You talk to people. How are you currently solving the problem in this particular space? What are you buying now? What are you using? Oh, would you consider something like this? You have to iterate and go out and do it. And you have to teach people. You have to teach people how to do it. That's why we've gone with the education and the workforce training. Not everybody knows how to be an entrepreneur. The schools teach entrepreneur, and they teach, Bill Gates and, Elon Musk and all that. I mean, unless they're really doing a good job. I mean, some schools do it well, but it's hard to teach someone entrepreneurship. You have to go out and do it. And I think just taking, like our course is 9 weeks, the boot camp is 4 weeks, that's enough to get someone who already has an idea or a passion to do something. That's enough time to kind of get them going in the right direction. They go out and try it, then they come back and they can go, there's other courses they can take. You don't really need a PhD to be an entrepreneur. You need a good solid training in your field that you're of expertise that you want to do, but then you have to go out and try it. You just got to do it.
So Claire, by the way, let Mark in. So Margaret, suppose someone came to you and you've been around now long enough to know whether or not there's market out there. I don't know whether there's a market for everything, but someone comes to you, such as Tom and Perry, and says, I'm interested in film. And in your community, there's no film market. What would you recommend to them?
you pivot.
Mark isn't showing up on my screen as being in the right meeting room. So wrong link.
Freeman was suggesting that Mark had been in the waiting room for 15 minutes. Anyway.
No, but he's not showing up here. I can't let him in unless he's got the right link.
Go ahead, Margaret, but let's fill in the blanks on that one. What do you tell someone when they said pivot? That's easy, is just go for another market. But I guess pivoting could also be to go to a community where there is a market.
Mhm.
Well, film is tricky because you have filmmakers that are producing content, and they're producing an artistic product, but they're not, unless they're thinking, they have to think the beyond, okay, once I get this amazing product, who's going to buy it? So really what you need to be doing is going out and selling your content to a distributor or to a studio or a somebody that wants it even before you produce it or make it.
So you're selling concept before you're selling content.
Well, with a film, unless you can do some kind of, quick, obviously you get a demo reel, you get something that you can show. But film is it's very tricky. I mean, most filmmakers don't have, corporate businesses. They have LLCs for each film that they make.
Right.
That's kind of not a really good model. And we've tried to help filmmakers. It's tough because most of the time when a filmmaker comes and wants to be in the program, we'll help them to a degree, but they're really into making their film. They've got to kind of step back and go, okay, where am I going to sell this film before I even make it?
Right.
And then go talk to those people. So we know there's a filmmaker in North Carolina who's trying to make a film about the USS Constitution, because he who knew before Trump even came to office, he was like, the Constitution is really important and people just don't know about it and da 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 da. And I was like, really? And he goes, yes. And I'm gonna make a film about it. So I was like, well, who's gonna buy it? Who's gonna watch that? So then I had a talk with him. I mean, he applied to our program. He did not get in, but I kept helping him, and he wound up going through another program, which was fine. And he had, there's a lot of things with film, because you got to have the actors, you got to have the distributing point, you've got to have the funders. He figured it out. He figured out that it was educational institutions would buy his film.
Right.
That's
more likely.
Yeah, and so he started down that road. So it's all about, it's back to the same. It's all about the customer. Go figure out who wants your product or service before you build it.
Well, you talk to, I sort of follow the film business pretty closely. I've been involved with it most of my life. And you hear about the people coming from Vancouver and writing scripts and whatnot, and they say, it's all action. It's all crap today. It's nothing really interesting coming out on the screens, because that's what the buyers want. They want to see this fast action, shoot them up, da-da-da-da-da. And how tedious it is. And every once in a while you see a really good exception to it, like The Dig was such a great film. So anyway, it's just such a tough business, and they need that LA. Then you got that Los Angeles scene down there, which is wild. It's just wild. I went into one cafe there, and I've been writing a couple of scripts over the last 10 years. And I bet you everybody in that bloody cafe had their laptop and they were typing a bloody screenplay. Then you went, okay, where do I go from here?
So Lorenz, you wanted to share with us some observations which you've made. You want to unmute and share us a little bit of what some of the links are that you've seen that you think would be of value at this point?
You're referring to the links I just shared?
Well, whatever they're links to. I can share links, but I'd rather sell them by telling people what are in there and why they might find them interesting.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm glad I'm a retired professor because it's pretty hard to be associated with the university in this group. I mean, I really appreciate your points of view, Perry, but it's not always so black and white, man. I mean, and that's why I shared this link. I know a little bit about the National Institute of Nanotechnology, and I think that is what you were referring to, that the federal government opened. I think it's the first national institute in Alberta, as there are institutes across the country. And I can't defend it. However, I can say it's not true that none of the engineers or none of the people associated with that don't ever go out and try to make a company, for example.
No, that's what I said they did do.
I thought you said you have to shut universities because you have to get engineers out so that they'll go and do something.
No, that's
which is kind of offensive.
Well,
actually.
it's one of the techniques, but no, anybody graduating theoretically is going out looking for a job and may well be trying to be entrepreneurial. But proceed anyway. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't take it that way. Maybe I took it the wrong way. I thought you were talking about the professors, because other times you spend, and that, because a lot of that money, that's where it's funding researchers, and there are whole floors of that institute, for example, that were the chemical engineers who are working on stuff for the oil sands, and so I don't think that money has received no improvement to the economy or to the people of Canada or Alberta. I think it has, but I'm not in a position. I'm not directly associated with that institute, so I'm not in a position to defend it. But I do want to put it into the mix that that there have been a number of very successful things that have come out of university. And then, of course, we were talking about the doctors who of course, had great success. But that's all I wanted to add. It was about the thing about, because maybe I took it wrong, but there's incredible pressure, particularly in engineering, to work with companies, and some do their research and do research that the companies want and is going to be helpful for them, and hopefully is going to improve their bottom line. And then there's some who I guess what is it called? It's the arm that the university has an interaction with the city and the province, Tech Edmonton, to try to develop things, and they've had mixed.
Yeah, mixed for sure.
Yeah. And again, I'm not in a position to defend them,
yeah.
but I just want to point out that these things exist. On the bigger thing of our whole discussion, though, I was wondering for our first speaker there about it's artists and creatives, and I was wondering, artists are separate from creatives, and I was wondering, why is that?
Say that again.
I don't think they are, actually.
Just repeat that again.
Oh, in the presentation,
yeah.
The expression, and I've heard this before, people talk about artists and creatives, and they separate out the artists. I'm just wondering, maybe they're just focusing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because when I talked about the bridging, this is the point I'm trying to make, is if on campus, it's notorious that arts and engineering are like cats and dogs, so like oil and water. The engineers don't appreciate the humanities and what the art students are doing, seeing it as valueless, and vice versa. They think the engineers are all about the almighty dollar and raping and plundering the environment. But regardless, the creative economy is one where we see a bridging of the arts and science, where we see technology beginning to penetrate the arts and vice versa. That there's something incredible to be gained by the technologies understanding the humanities. And when you look at Steve Jobs, when you look at Einstein himself, when you look at what Da Vinci did, I mean, the geniuses of society that were the true change agents were bridgers. So Steve Jobs' message, and the messages to our universities, and McMaster was the one that sort of broke this open, when McMaster realized that we can't just keep on selling knowledge. We've got to appreciate that until knowledge gets into the hands of the consumer, all we're doing is developing the professions. And so what McMaster did is they said to the universities across Canada that when you're recruiting students for medicine, look at the relational skills of the person that you're recruiting. I was just talking to a dental student during a walk this week, and she was acknowledging that the university's curriculum is increasingly incorporating some appreciation of the humanities. Now, I don't expect the surgeon to be standing there thinking about creativity, but I do expect the surgeon to have some foundation in the humanities, given their subject matter. And that to me is the revolution that we're really going on the fringe of, or entering into, is a much better appreciation, not about supply, but about the ultimate consumer in a global market. I think that's what Africa is seeing, that when Margaret spoke about where entrepreneurialism is at its peak, is where people aren't thinking about supply. They're thinking, what is the customer needing today? What does the customer want? Todd, you talked about sort of slipping to the bottom, because in some ways the consumer wants speed, they want it now. Are they really thinking about film and digesting intellectual product, something enriching, or is it just a quick fix? I don't know. I don't know how you break out of that.
Can I respond to that?
Lorenz? Yeah.
Yeah, you have my support on that. With regard to what you said about Einstein and Jobs and Da Vinci, absolutely, and there is an improvement in that, and I think there is an appreciation of that, and in fact, there is more recently, since my time, I think there is a lot more cross-fertilization. For example, in first-year design projects, things like that. So there's an attempt made in that way. But there is one thing I wanted to say from a couple of meetings ago. And as some people were saying, why don't we close the university or whatever? And the thing is that if you want that, that's why you need the university. Because if you put the screws to the university, which has been happening for some time now, the people who are suffering are the artists, right? So they're not going to be there. Like, for example, when I retired, I met a person who was retiring as well, who taught choral singing. She was a choral singing specialist. And I said to her, thank heavens you were there, because my children learned how to sing in a choir by someone who you taught. Like, I want that person there. But she's
Okay, I'm going to interrupt because we're running a little late.
Yeah.
It's now 5. I've only got 8 minutes. I'm going to extend. I'm going to extend. Thanks, Lorenz. I'm going to extend the session by 15 minutes, Claire. Given that Mark's arrived, and maybe Mark, you arrived a lot earlier than I realized. But it's your stage now, and Mark Anielski. The happiness in the economy is up next, and Mark, take us through 11 minutes, and we'll open up some discussion after that. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Claire, for letting me in finally.
Claire, you look like you're asleep.
Oh, it's a picture.
Just a picture of Claire, but I'm gonna go cheers.
I sorry about that, Mark. I think Perry had the wrong link there. I'll have to make sure
I have to wait
for next time.
Yeah, gotcha.
I poured myself a wild turkey bourbon, so cheers.
Oh, that's good. That's perfect.
Yeah, you're the only one drinking today, so go ahead.
It's too late to be creative. You want to drink.
You can be very creative right now.
Well, I'm not sure because I haven't been privy to your conversation. The work I'm involved in now in the economics of happiness is focusing on measuring creativity from the perspective of well-being, and work a lot with First Nations. So I've been taking their model of well-being, which is the medicine wheel. And, the Cree have a saying, every child born is an answer to a prayer. So I would ask my business students at the U of A, what prayer were you born into? Why do you want 3 more letters after your name? Because if you're not pursuing the gifts and talents that you were gifted with, then what are you doing? And I think that goes to the heart of creativity. So when I measure well-being now, it's mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And I'm about to run the largest well-being survey in Ireland through the largest independent media outlet, which will start running next or a couple of weeks now. So right during COVID, we're going to be asking people how they sleep, how they feel about their neighbors, how much joy do they feel in their life, things that stats can't ever ask you. So that's what I've been doing, and having fun doing it, and putting that onto the balance sheet of First Nations, because well-being should be on the balance sheet, should be the modern kind of form of treaty. not just the socioeconomic gaps. So I'm
But
passionate about that.
why natives? Why the indigenous? Why did you target that group?
Because they pay and they're small. So scale is important. I try to do this in Edmonton. It's in 2012, Mendel and Lorna Rosen shut me down, or at least ended the well-being indicator work. And I knew that I'd have to wait 8 years for that day to come again. And it seems to be during COVID now, people are more interested in well-being than before. So a pandemic has a way of, I guess, focusing our accounting systems on the right metrics. So that's what so it's not to say that, China's doing it to some extent. I've been in Singapore, I've been to Tahiti, I've been to a lot of places trying to adopt the same protocol. And I come up from it from an accounting perspective because I started with PwC in my early days, and all seems to come back to accounting, failure to produce robust financial statements that actually measure well-being and the return on well-being that is derived from assets. That sounds really boring for Friday night, but Haley, I know.
But it's not boring. I mean, what you're touching on, and the reason why I'm intrigued by what you're doing, is one of the underlying themes of this discussion has been a refocusing away from supply and an increasing focus on market. And the market, or the buyer, is ultimately the customer, and the consumer buys or doesn't buy based on a number of features of their life and of how they buy, when they buy, where they buy. So by focusing on the individual as a consumer, which you're doing when you talk about well-being, I think, is putting the focus on a different aspect of the economy than what we've historically done when we were nation and supply building.
I agree. I mean, you mentioned Steve Jobs. I mean, I'm still on a Mac I started on a Mac and never left a Mac. And not because Steve Jobs learned how to make nice cabinets from his father, but he was attuned to his aesthetic. He was tuned to real utility. And so I think, smart business knows this. I mean, economists like to talk about efficiency, but at the end of the day, we make decisions on emotion and feelings. So why aren't we measuring feelings? Why do we keep measuring GDP and money changing hands? It's fine to measure those things. But if I get a sense of how you sleep at night, I have a pretty good sense of my neighborhood. I have a sleep index for Edmonton, and that's interesting.
But economics is actually in the arts department, and there are aspects of economics, particularly the Nobel Prize winners of the last few years, have all focused on buying behavior with an increasing appreciation of how human beings behave in a market. So when you look at well-being, it seems to me you're touching an aspect of that. Maybe you're touching a very broad aspect. How broad do you assess, quote, well-being?
Well, I do prepare new financial statements. I'm working with the Comox First Nation on Vancouver Island. So they're I'm with them at the treaty table with Canada on the other side. And we're conducting a well-being survey right now. It's very comprehensive. It takes about probably 15 minutes to complete. It's like getting a census form, but it asks you all kinds of well-being questions. And the government of Canada doesn't know what to do with it. And they're like, we've never seen anything like this. And I said, exactly. You've never asked Canadians these questions. And this First Nations, as small as it is, 120 people, is going to set the first well-being treaty of its kind in this country. And so when I say well-being balance sheet, I'm like, the lands, the fish, the salmon, the eagles, the people and their hope and the kids' hope and their feeling of belonging and trust, right? Their trust of the local businesses, their sense of, not being excluded from Comox or Courtney because of their race. Those are important questions to account for, and that's going to be on their balance sheet now. And it doesn't really matter.
So let me interrupt there, because I want to be a little careful on how I interpret what you just said. I could conclude from what you just said is the Indigenous population that you work with view themselves as victims and spend the rest of their life, or they view themselves as having increased opportunities. Tell me about that. What's the difference?
Not victims. What the women are telling me is, I can't believe it's like our grandmothers prayed for this day to come. That's what the women are saying.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a matrilineal culture. I think that Indigenous people, like for me at least, I'm not Indigenous. I'm a first generation German Austrian. I have no roots at all. So I'm an imposter. But you know, the women I work with, Indigenous women, they say this is the time to restore the teachings of Turtle Island, right? And we waited a long time for this. This is not about retribution against the colonizer. This is about getting to be at the same economic table together, you know, journeying together like the Tura Wampum originally visioned, that Ben Franklin and or you know Washington and the Onondaga signed. So these are exciting for me. They're exciting moments in our journey.
Well, if you're helping build that bridge, because I can recall being engaged in a consultation to go into the North Lakes of Alberta. In the North Lakes, very few people have visited, and that's your trout, your peerless, your et cetera. And I was sent up there because 5 kids had died of glue sniffing. And I met with people throughout to talk about what might be done differently. And most of what I ran into was denial, that the resolution to the glue sniffing of the kids was to plow away the bushes that the kids had sat in and sniffed glue. Those who had an insight into the future were the women. They were the ones leaving and getting a degree and getting administrative training and seeing learning as a way to the future, where others saw the past as something that they envied and wanted to recreate. But if you were able to bridge that through women, congratulations. Roy, you've got a comment you want to make? Take yourself off mute first.
I really appreciate what Mark's saying and believe, I've said it out loud now to a few friends since last July, that I believe the earth is evolving. Humans as a species are, as a whole, getting more conscientious and getting more conscious. And
Absolutely.
it's demonstrating in this really loud noise of disruption in our society. And people are choosing sides and thinking it's black and white, but it's not. The earth is colorful. And I think we're starting to be more at peace with who we are without this future expectation of what might come, but the present of well-being now. What does that involve? And there's really, for me, it's 2 things. It's the global me or the solo me. And only when both of those are true for what I'm choosing should I choose that.
Just a second. Jill, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Perry. And Mark, wherever you are, hello. You know,
I'm
Strathcona. You know, I'm one of your big fans. Thank you very much for being here today. There's so many things that I need to speak with you about that overlap. So give me just a couple of minutes here. Your survey going into Ireland next week. Next Thursday, I'm presenting to Ireland as well on the pivot of marketing through their Management Consulting Association there. Today, I listened to Jim Power, their economist for Ireland, and how their conditions are facing the country. They're very similar to Canadians, and I'm going to ask you the question about why you chose Ireland in a second here. And then the second thing here is in what I know about, because I'm now working in virtual conference masteries, we've launched a training session in that area. We happen to know a couple of things here in terms of the matriarchal societies that you're all talking about in the Indigenous world. And what we're hearing is that nearly half of the women in any of our virtual conferences and our meetings are not being heard in these meetings. They're not getting the respect or even the invitation to convey their opinions. And I know to this group that's kind of unusual because I know you all do a lot of respect the other gender, but that's what's happening in the large surveys. More information is telling us that the Spanish population and the populations that are of color generations, women, they do not have supporters or champions. It's like 19 and 20% don't have champions in the workplace. So to me, I'm just, I thought we were way, way beyond this, but apparently not. So I just put that on the table for you to hear, and I'm going to hear now why you chose Ireland for your survey. And I'll be
Well, I did not choose Ireland. The head of marketing for Independent IE, which is owned by Media House, a Belgium investment consortium, reached out to me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great marketing platform. So because I podcast a lot and I just put stuff up there.
Yeah.
So Paul Dunny is his name, contacts me about a month ago and says, I see you have a survey. And I said, yeah. Do you think just a wild shot, do you think we could do it for on our platform on Independent? And I said, sure, why not? I already have the survey open source. It's running now. And I use it with all my clients. And he said, well, it's a long shot. I'll take it to the editorial board. And they approved.
Tell me
The only
again that company.
It's called Independent IE. You can Independent and .ie, which is Ireland, but it's owned by a Belgium consortium called Media House, and they have apparently their largest digital media outlet in Ireland get about 10 million hits a day or something, and they're in other countries as well. So I figured if we can do this in Ireland, we can do it in the other countries. Now the response to the women, it's amazing. I ran the well-being survey in the Opaskwayak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. The chief, or he doesn't call himself chief, he calls himself a Nigano, which means leader in Cree. He says chief is a colonizer word, and through the Indian Act, they keep imposing hierarchy on us. But we are a distributive, group, and women are central to the success of that nation, about 5,000. And so we ran the survey. We started during COVID, and then administration said, no, stop the survey. We can't ask, people are depressed. They're anxious. So we opened it up again in September and finished in November. And we had 450 respondents from age 10 to 80. And I told them, and 70% were women. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what's happening with the men? They're sitting on the couch. Get those guys up and fill out the survey, right? It's totally voluntary. And when I did the number crunching, I showed them that you would rank number 3 in the world in the happiness rankings. And meanwhile, in Canada, life satisfaction has dropped 19% from 2019. Same survey question. And this little nation, which lost 30 members to COVID, is ranking 3rd after Finland and Denmark. And they can't believe it. And they're excited because they're like, we want to make well-being the basis of our budgeting now and our decision-making.
Is it fair to ask you what it is you think is present or why that is such a high ranking?
I don't know. It's just a question that says, all things considered, how would you rate your life satisfaction from 1 to 10 today? That's the only question. Same question asked globally on the World Happiness.
So is that group living in downtown Winnipeg? Are they
one of the most racist communities in Manitoba?
So where are they?
They're 5 hours north of Winnipeg by car.
Oh, fascinating.
And 11 hours due east from Edmonton along the Saskatchewan River. And Chief Anigano, Anigano, his name is Christian Sinclair. When he bought my book, The Economics of Well-Being, he called me the next day. He said, I want you to come to my community. And I said, where are you? He was like, I'm in the PAW. I'm like, I'm not going to the PAW. There's no way. But I went before COVID, and they welcomed me. I met with elders. I sat with them. They had an amazing community, mostly women running administration, doing an amazing job. And he said, your vision in your book for sovereignty, financial sovereignty, is our vision. We want to move in that direction. And this guy's a former Canadian military sniper. He's not afraid. He knows the art of war. So I'm excited, and it's the Cree people, and it connects us to Edmonton. I learned from my friend Lewis Cardinal that Edmonton is a very special place. It's called the Great Pehonan, the great gathering place on Turtle Island. And I never learned that at Louis Saint Laurent High School at U of A. Never heard that story. And that to me is exciting. Like, here we are in this place where 8,000 years of trading and relational building and putting aside differences occurred right in the Donald Ross Flats. And to me, that's the model. Isn't that the relational model that we all want, I think?
Okay, but that was once. I'm intrigued by a community that exists today that could rank third in the world, that is miles away from an urban environment, probably has 100% employment. In other words,
No.
the economists would say this ranks really high on an economic index, or very low on an economic index, but very high on a well-being index.
Well, so I'm trying to square as an economist, how is it that a community has incomes that are maybe 20% lower than Winnipeg,
right,
can still rate such high life satisfaction? There's got to be other things in life, including their understanding of their traditional use values, the muskrat and plants and medicines, which we surveyed as well. We said, how much of these traditional practices are you aware of? What's your understanding of your culture, your laws, your language? That's the inventory we took. So we didn't just measure how much money they made. I asked them, how do you feel about how much money you make? Is it enough to meet your needs? And, a good majority said, yeah, it's enough to meet our needs, but we're getting our needs met through other things too. And that's
something quite intriguing here. And, we need to dig real deep in order to get an understanding of how they evaluate well-being versus how you evaluate well-being in the urban environment that is. Well, let me share a story, because we're reaching the end of our session. I'll share a story from an economist at University of Chicago. I don't think I've told you this story before, but the story you might know, Mark, and Sharon, you might know as well, and maybe even Roy. But apparently this grandpa was sitting in a rocking chair with his grandson, and he was telling him the following story, that there was a community like the one you referred to in Manitoba, where people shared fuzzies. And they handed these fuzzies, which are these little round balls that were different colors. And they had a sort of a smile on them, or an attitude of happiness. And they shared them around the community freely. And everyone in that community felt that their well-being was high, and they felt very comfortable with one another. They shared these fuzzies whenever they had an opportunity to do so. Sharing was quite easy. In fact, very much part of the culture. And then one day, a helicopter arrived in town, and that helicopter was a witch with a big pimple on her nose. And she said to the community, did you know that there's a shortage of fuzzies? Oh, a shortage of fuzzies. Well, we didn't know that, but we've got to be more careful in distributing these fuzzies. And they began to lock them up and preserve them and count them and make sure they hadn't lost any. And before you know it, in town, shopping malls were being built and highways were being constructed and office towers. Commerce was roaring, but the fuzzies weren't being shared anymore. And the little boy sitting on the grandfather's lap turned to his grandpa and he said, what would have happened if there hadn't been a shortage of fuzzies? And I wonder in that community in Manitoba whether or not there's a lot of fuzzies around and they're not quite so concerned about the sharing and the counting, and whether or not well-being is much less related to the haves and the have-nots, the shortages, and that counting is not a major part of their culture. Do you want to comment, Mark?
Well, it's true. Counting is, I always ask my business student, if you didn't have to keep financial statements, would you still count? Why do you keep financial statements? Why do we count anyways? So we got to go all the way back to, why do we count? And why do we monetize things? And what I learned, this is one thing that blew me away, is I learned this from Karen Pheasant, who's doing her PhD. She's from Manitoulin Island. She's doing her PhD at U of A. She told me one day in near Hinton, in the kitchen of Rocky Notness, she said, do you know Abraham Maslow came to Alberta? You mean the guy that gave us the hierarchy of needs? Do you know that he spent his time with the Blackfoot, the Piikani, and they taught him about the medicine wheel? They didn't even call it the medicine wheel. This is the human being as a circle of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. And when we go in the sweat lodge, we say all my relations. It's like, why did they say all of my relations? Because they think about their grandmothers and their grandfathers when the child is born. So it's like, we have so much to learn. Like, why do we keep turning things into pyramids and hierarchical structures. Maybe it come the Romans and the British that we inherited, but when you think in terms of circle, everything changes.
Well, it's now 9:45, 9:45, no, 5:45. That's what happened. A little bit of too much scotch there, I guess. 5:45. So we really are at the wrap-up point, because I did tell you that I would extend it 15 minutes and leave it at that. Any parting last-minute comments? Any ideas on what might be a reasonable topic for our next session?
Harry, could I just say something, please, quickly?
Go ahead.
There's an aspect on creativity and being an artist and everything like that we haven't touched on, which is the aspect of relationships. And, you know, the Brits have a thing where they say the end of creativity is the pram in the hallway. And that is, I think, indicative of what a lot of artists have to face, is how to maintain relationships and pursue your art and pursue your creative objectives, you know, and I think that's an issue that's worth discussing at some point.
Relationships, that's about as broad as creativity.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can think about
relationships. You talk about Einstein, you talk Steve Jobs. You know, Einstein was a terrible father. He was just terrible.
But he played a good violin.
Hmm?
He played a good violin.
Good violin. But I have a friend who's been trying to make a documentary for years on Einstein's father, or on Einstein as a father. And he just, it's really mind-boggling. And what was the other one? There was Steve Jobs, of course. You know.
Well, Da Vinci didn't have children, so he
was gay.
He checked out. Okay, well, we'll give some thought to shaping something around relationships, and that you've spoken and we listen. So we'll give it a shot. It's a wide enough topic that I can take it any way I want. So thank you very, very much. Haley, thank you again. Shirley, nice to see you again. Mel, you were quiet today, but I know you were listening intensely. Perry, always a pleasure to have you here. Mark, so glad. Sorry we kept you waiting for 15 minutes and gave you a chance to drink and imbibe a little bit, but your insights were marvelous. I really would like to know a little bit more about Manitoba, and I'm intrigued about how Ireland found you, because my argument has been we've got to be in the market every day like Sharon is, to find that market. And in fact, it found it to you, but you did put a lot out there to attract the market. Todd, always fun. Freeman, you know my views on what we've shared. So Roy, thanks for your fresh perspectives. Lorenz, I don't think I offended. I opened up a discussion about the relevance of the university and how it's increasingly becoming aware of what it needs to do to find its way into the 21st century. And delighted to have you there helping us bridge. Kalia, I know you're there. I didn't hear from you, but I was delighted to see your presence. And Ron, you were quiet today, but always to see your presence. So thank you all. I've had enough scotch for tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you, Claire, very, very much. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry about the delay, Mark. We'll get it right next time.
Okay.
No worries. Not offended. I got some work done.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Mark, Sharon here. Before you go, Mark, can you send me a message to, or can I get your email? You just put it in chat to me, okay?
I sent you it in chat. Anielski